underdogs, underestimated, we the ones.
It's the Underdogs. We're back. Jordan Brenner, Peter Keating. How are you doing today, Peter? Happy belated 4th of July.
Happy Independence Day, Jordan. I hope you got your wish for Independence Day, unless it was to be independent of me.
I was literally about to make that joke, but you beat me to it, as always. Peter, it didn't stop us from putting together a fun show for today. I know you've got some awesome thoughts on the Homerun Derby, a couple picks and a couple myths to dispel. And obviously, The Bachelorette is going again. We've got
Bachelorette is back. The franchise is back. Yeah, we can argue about that later.
We got a couple thoughts on that. But first, it's July. Some say it's a dead part of the sports calendar. I say it's when we start thinking about fantasy football. Peter, what we do on this show is a little bit different. You can go anywhere for a list of your top 30 running backs or quarterbacks or receivers. And obviously, training camps haven't even gotten going yet. What we want to do is take a step back and look at the bigger picture ideas of what leads to a breakout candidate and underdog at various positions. So we're going to start with running backs today and sort of give you guys who are listening some things to pay attention to as training camp starts, some trends, a little window into how we do our research, and then we got a couple guys to keep an eye on. But Peter, I guess I want to start out first by saying the two biggest breakout running backs last year, unexpected underdogs, were Jamal Williams and Josh Jacobs. And you could look at any group of statistics you'd like. You could look into any crystal ball you wanted. There was no indication that either of them was going to produce the way they did last year. Jamal Williams went from being a backup in Detroit to scoring 17 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs, there were rumors of him losing carries. Instead, he had his most efficient season ever. He doubled his rushing yards. So some of this is just, you can't predict baseball, Susan, right?
It sure is. And I remember thinking really early on last year that maybe Josh Jacobs would get even more carries. Maybe they would try to just wear him out instead of trying to re-sign him. And maybe they would just get conservative because they had been lucky the year before. But no. By the time training camp started, everyone was basically like, they're going to move a little bit away from him. I mean, they got great new receivers. Derek Carr is going to air it out. I mean, whatever else was going on, that guy wasn't supposed to become the bell cow for this run heavy team and go wild, but he did. So I think you're right. There's some things you just can't predict, but I also think, when we look at this, we're looking at this position by position, right? So there's stuff specific to the position that we want to consider, but we also have to realize that fantasy is changing, for the positions where production correlates really well with where players get drafted in fantasy leagues. Those correlations are getting tighter and tighter. It's actually getting harder in fantasy life to find surprises, because I don't want to say we're all doing our own scouting. It's not like that, but we all now have access to the same, whether it's, you think it's the top 6 or 10 or 15 or 30 experts out there who are doing their own scouting. It's almost like, what do they call it? An epistemic loop where everybody's talking to themselves. And so in the positions where that actually does predict performance, fantasy drafts are just getting better and better and better.
Yeah, there's so much information out there. There are so many people who do this full time for a living, analyze this year round, that it's getting harder to find a diamond in the rough. But we tried to do that anyway. So the way we've made our mark over the years, particularly with giant killers and bracket breakers in the NCAA tournament, is we look at trends over time, and then we see what things are important and how do they apply to this year's group. So we've tried a similar approach with fantasy football. We looked, going back about 6-7 years, we compared running backs average draft position, ADP, to how they perform in terms of both points per game, total points. And then we looked at all sorts of factors. Did they have a new quarterback this season? Did they change teams? Were they hurt? What year of their career were they in? Wondering maybe, okay, older running backs, did they?
Right. How old are they? What were their workloads previously? Do you want to deliver the stunning, because it's kind of stunningly so boring conclusion? to this search. We looked at everything we could look at.
Right. There's really no rhyme or reason in a lot of ways to who kind of emerges. Now, there are a few subtle trends we can look at, but it was pretty amazing to go as deep as we did in our research and not find any massive things pop out the way, say, offensive rebounding does in terms of college basketball upsets,
right. That's because volume is what matters most. It's not to say that for a running back, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is or whether you're healthy or any of those things. It's not that. It's that volume is not just overwhelmingly important, but it sort of overlaps and subsumes everything else, because if you're healthy, you get more playing time, you get more carries. If you're surprisingly good, right? If you do come out of nowhere, you quickly get more carries and more volume and more points, right? That doesn't take a long time for that to happen. So as straightforward as it may seem, volume is what really dictates points. Now, how do you predict who's going to get giant increases in volume? That's we have some ideas, but that's kind of tough. We just want to lay that out there. You know, in other positions, wide receiver specifically, if there's inside information or there's breakout candidates or there's metrics that you can find that maybe correlate with points better than just how often you run the damn ball. But for running backs, it's a pretty tight correlation.
Right. And I want to get into a couple guys soon, but if you look at last year's biggest busts and then biggest breakouts, for instance, 9 of the 10 biggest busts were on the same team as in 2021. So it wasn't like there was like a big shift. Now, some of them got hurt. Javonte Williams, Chase Edmonds, Jonathan Taylor missed some time, Elijah Mitchell, and on and on and on. Half had new QBs, half didn't. But then if you look at the biggest risers, it's the same thing. 9 of the 10 players who had the biggest differences between what they were expected to do and how they performed were either rookies or returning to their team. There were guys who you had sort of thought, well, maybe with more opportunity would do well, but they weren't surprises. Ramondre Stevenson, Tyler Algier, Breece Hall, rookie with the Jets, right? Those opportunities came. Tony Pollard, everyone knew at this point that he was more talented running back than Ezekiel Elliott. He just needed the opportunity. So as Peter said, the single most important thing for running backs in particular is volume. So what you should be looking at now as we get closer to training camps, who's going to get the ball more than expected and who's going to do it behind a good offensive line.
Now let's jump right there for 1 second, because there is something interesting about the players who performed surprisingly well at running back. You might think a majority of these cases are like Tony Pollard, where a guy's playing behind another player who has obviously lost a step, who's slower, who's not as explosive. Tony Pollard is basically the only guy on the top 10 surprises list who that description applies to. Many of the rest of the biggest surprises, Latavius Murray, Jeff Wilson in Miami, Pacheco in Kansas City, Miles Sanders. These guys, what stood out about them last year is the yards per attempt they got before contact. These were guys who were plopped into systems with great offensive lines, right? So I don't want to say anybody could have done those jobs, but they were able to maximize the opportunities, not because they were undiscovered breakaway potential like speed guys, right? It's not like Cordarrelle Patterson. It was guys who were put into systems like Zonovan Knight, another example. Now, Tony Pollard also has explosive yards after contact. These guys were barely broke average in yards after contact. Yards before contact were what mattered.
Peter, this is dovetailing with what you're seeing in real life. Now, I've long held the belief that running back was the most overrated position in football. To me, you make...
Well, Jordan, it's a real stretch to say that now in the year 2023. Who called you last night? Dalvin Cook? I mean...
Yeah, exactly. No, I've been saying this since like 2000. But look, you create a big enough hole...
And who called you then? Jamal Lewis? I mean...
Even you might be able to walk through it. So my point is now you're seeing, right? Running backs aren't getting paid, et cetera, et cetera. So it stands to figure that if you have a really good offensive line, and you can open up holes, that if your top running back goes down, you can plug and play somebody else in that spot. And that's exactly what we saw in terms of some of the biggest breakouts last year. So with that in mind, Peter, I want to ask you, looking at early ADP, where guys are going to draft, who outside of the top 25, top 30, are a couple of guys that you think could move into that group and are worth sort of a lottery ticket a little bit later in the
I'll give
draft?
you my absolute favorite. He's right on that border. He's going 30th in average draft position right now. I'm talking about James Cook in Buffalo. He
Mm-hmm.
has a growing role on a team that not only scored 455 points last year, but if you take Josh Allen out of their offense, they still averaged 3.2 yards before contact per attempt. They're blowing holes open for everybody, is what I'm trying to say. And now Devin Singletary's gone, and you could just see in the second half of last year. Look, for fans who are really into this, none of this is particularly surprising, but James Cook got 86 yards against Cleveland, and then started to get 40% of snaps. By the end of the year, he was up to over 50% of snaps. When he does break through those holes, he is explosive. He gained more than 3 yards after contact per attempt, 5.7 yards overall per attempt, which is pretty damn good, and made a lot of people miss tackles.
I'm with you on everything, except I will believe it when I see it that the Bills are committed to running the ball. They just fall into this pattern where it's pass to Josh Allen. I know they say they want to run it more. Let's see.
So let me give you 3 quick responses really quick.
Okay.
Number 1, he's a good pass catcher. He had 21 receptions for 180 yards in about a third of a season's playing time. Whether or not they try to rely on Josh Allen a little less, he's going to have a role. Secondly, here's the thing. He's going in drafts behind unproven players and injury cases. He's going, and also players on terrible teams that are going to have a hard time moving the ball at all. He's going behind James Conner. He's going behind Cam Akers. He's going behind Alexander Madison. I don't think 30th represents his real value, there's just a tremendous upside. So I said 3, but I'm going to stop.
Give me a quick hitting other guy before I give you my brilliant pick.
Way deeper than that. I love Roschon Johnson of the Bears, 4th round running back. But look, if he gets the starting job, that's another team that, even if you adjust for the fact they have a great running quarterback, was blowing holes open. At Texas, he had not only size, but agility. He had a 49% missed tackle rate his senior year. That's the 4th. His metrics are basically the 4th best running back in the draft, and a draft that a couple of them are going to be possibly all-time greats. Look, there are teams that run well and run a lot. They include Atlanta, Baltimore, the 49ers, usual suspects. Chicago's like that, even accounting, again, for Justin Fields. And so you drop him in there, he's comparable to the kinds of running backs that have surprised and maximized their opportunities.
All right, let me give you a couple guys that I'm looking at. First of all, they're both outside of the top 30. I'm not looking for guys who you're going to take in the first few rounds anyway, and maybe,
Well, Roschon Johnson's running back 53. You got anybody lower than that?
Fair enough. Okay. The first guy I'm looking at, for a variety of reasons, is Samaje Perine. He signed with Denver as a free agent. He's currently going as running back 37 in early drafts. Here's the case for Perine. First of all, Sean Payton wanted him, met with him, chose Denver with a similar contract offer to stay in Cincinnati. Second thing is, Javonte Williams is coming back from an ACL and I think PCL injury. Okay. We saw last year J.K. Dobbins really didn't recover from that for Baltimore. The idea that Javonte Williams is going to be the same player this season is tough to swallow at best. So that creates potentially more opportunity for Perine. He's also a really good pass catching back. Sean Payton's offense has always featured pass catching backs. Russell Wilson has been looking to dump down more. So, and finally, Pro Football Focus has the Broncos offensive line ranked 11th in the NFL. So there are a number of scenarios where you could possibly get top 20 value out of Perine at the 37th spot. So that's
right.
That's
talking about dropping a guy into a situation that's really well, right. He's going to sleep in a bed that's made very nicely for him, I think.
Right. Look, or Javonte Williams comes back and he's totally healthy and he rushed for 1,800 yards. But what I'm saying is pay attention in training camp to how that evolves. And it's worth, again, compared to some of the other guys going in that spot, it's worth a look. Similarly, Rashad Penny is signed in Philadelphia. They've completely redone their running back room. Obviously, they have DeAndre Swift. He is the big name free agent addition. He obviously has a ton of talent, but he also has an injury history. And it's not out of their own possibilities that he gets hurt, or that Penny, who's always been an attractive talent and has also had trouble staying healthy, now they're behind arguably the best offensive line in football. It's not outside of their own possibilities that something comes up with Swift and that Penny leapfrogs. And if you Miles Sanders was a top 20 running back on that team last year with Jalen Hurts vulturing a lot of touchdowns. I could see Penny fighting his way into more carries. Again, for a guy going 39th among running backs at drafts, I think there's value. So just pay attention to those two situations in training camp, see how they evolve. And remember, if you're looking to take a flyer on someone in the mid to late rounds, target a good offensive line where there's a plug and play opportunity, and target someone behind a running back who has some sort of a concern about why they may be able to hold on to a starting job. Right. Well, in terms of context, there's one context that I cannot stand this time of year. And it's the idea that the home run derby somehow screws up people's swings. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at who the best bets to win the home run title at the All-Star game are next. All right, so Peter, I know you're super into the Derby. It's your favorite event in all of sports, maybe after the hot dog contest. What should we be looking at right now? First of all, do you want to knock down the straw man in the room? Do you want
all right, let's do this.
Put this to bed forever? Yeah.
Let's do this, especially in a year where Randy Arozarena, one of the most fun players to watch in all of baseball, right? Mookie Betts, who's in the home run derby because his wife told him he had to do it. Said, what haven't you done yet? You got to do this, right? Mm-hmm. When those guys are in the home run derby, when Vlad Guerrero is in it, he hit 91 home runs in the home run derby a couple of years ago. Pete Alonso, who said he was the best power hitter on the planet after winning the home run derby back in 2019, or maybe it was 2021. All these guys are going to make a great contest. And what do we have to hear? We have to hear how the home run derby messes up batters' swings. We have to hear about there's a curse of the home run derby. Look, yes, do players hit fewer home runs after the home run derby than before? Yes. Last year, all the players in the home run derby hit 144 home runs collectively before the All-Star break. They hit 98 after. But this is just like the Madden curse or the Sports Illustrated cover curse. Like, in some ways, when you're at the top, there's nowhere to go but down. Now, look, in hitting home runs, there's two things involved. Jordan, stop me if this gets too complicated.
Hold on. This
is my
most groundbreaking stuff. Yeah.
This is like calculus. Okay. This is I worked for years to formulate this statement. To hit a home run, you have to hit a fly ball, and the fly ball has to go over a wall.
Oh, come on. Stop it.
There you go. Now look,
I think people just drove off the road if they were listening to this.
Now look, I know this is, I mean, you can bet on the fact, you can bet, if you can find the line, that if you hit a fly ball and it goes over the wall, it's a home run. Now, look, your fly ball percentage, right? How often you hit a fly ball is kind of like one of your fingerprints as a batter. 50% is a lot. There's 4 guys in the entire majors who are over 50%. It down around 24%, 25%, you get like DJ LeMahieu, guys who you can't, Bo Bichette this year, constantly see them, instead of hitting line drives, hit maybe some line drives, but hit a lot of balls into the ground. Okay. But the other half of it, what percentage of your fly balls turn into home runs? Now, there is some skill there. If you mash the ball, like if Shohei Ohtani leads the majors in that category, but it's much more variable. The ballparks affect it. The schedule affects it. Weather affects it. Imagine if you right now had 6 games left at Coors Field. You could change the entire home run stat line of your season in 1 week because you were there if you had a good week, right? Luck affects it. So here's the deal. And let me just say one other thing. We tend to call bad luck a curse and good luck skill or improvement, right? So overall, since the home run derby began, players' fly ball percentage before the derby averaged 40.1%, fly ball hitters. After the derby, averaged, ready, 40%, the same number. Now, last year, Juan Soto, before the derby, 20.8% of his fly balls were turning into home runs. The league average is about 12, 13%. A lot of the balls were just going over the wall for him. Afterwards, that dropped off. He still hit just as many fly balls as ever, but his fly ball to home run ratio regressed to the mean, and he hit only 7 home runs after the break. In 2017, Cody Bellinger had 25 home runs in the first half. 30% of his balls were flying out, going over his home runs. That's just unsustainable. Look, that same year, Giancarlo Stanton hit 33 home runs in the second half. Nobody said somebody lifted a curse.
That's right.
Nobody said he had great luck. So look, let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
So let me just say this. 69.4% of players have hit fewer home runs after the break. 70.8%, basically the same number, have seen their fly ball to home run ratios decline. 70% come down from the abnormally high level. So yeah, first half of the season, guys smacking home runs. A few of them are lucky they get invited to the Derby, then their luck runs out. It's as simple as that.
We don't have the full field yet. They don't have odds up, but we do have 6 of the participants so far. Pete Alonso, Randy Arozarena, Mookie Betts, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Julio Rodriguez, the hometown guy, and Adley Rutschman. Is there anything from this fly ball data, hard hit ball data, stuff that we've looked at in previous home run derbies that leads you to have 1 or 2 guys in mind for when you can bet on this?
Yes. Vlad Guerrero has 117 mile an hour maximum exit velocity. 2/3 of his home runs this year would have been home runs in any ballpark. Of all the competitors, he's the only one that StatCast says should actually have more home runs. He's been a little unlucky. He had 40 home runs in 1 round of the home run derby. That's a record. I'd watch him. I also think Mookie Betts he's a super smart player. He's been adjusting his launch angle for years. He's been increasing his fly ball rate, and he has the highest average exit velocity on fly balls and line drives, along with Guerrero, along with Randy. I think he's somebody to watch because he can do things that other people can't just because he's trying. And Pete Alonso, 24% fly ball to home run rate. That's way high. He has been somewhat lucky on home runs, but this is why you look at numbers, Jordan, even for a meaningless exhibition. Pete Alonso is also, at the same time, he's been hitting 190 on balls in play. Pete Alonso has 29 singles and 7 doubles. For the second half of the season, I think his stats are going to look so much more different from his first half than almost anyone else in baseball. You should bet on him to have fewer home runs, like in the low 40s, not 50, and pull his average up to
I think
2/3 or 240s.
And again, I think regardless of who I guess unless Ohtani joins, I think it's pretty clear that Pete Alonso will be the favorite. If you're looking for an underdog, you're looking for a long shot. I like where your head's at. I mean, it's hard to think of Vlad Guerrero as an underdog. I would bet.
I know, right?
I would bet his odds are probably second best of this group. But I like where your head's at with a Arozarena or Mookie Betts.
I'll also say this: there's still a couple of slots left. We have 6 competitors. They're going to need a couple of other guys.
Yeah, who would you give those slots to?
Well,
if
Jordan,
you were the czar of the home run derby?
This is not an all-round athletic talent or competition. Pick a guy who all he does is hit home runs. I want to see Joey Gallo get in there. Or if you've seen enough of Joey Gallo for your lifetime or your career, how about Jack Sawinski? There's a young guy who plays hard. He has the highest fly ball rate in the major league, 60%. He doesn't even have to train for the home run derby. I would love to see a guy like that have his one shining moment for what he does best.
I was actually hoping for Isaiah Kiner Falefa, just to throw a little curveball into the mix. But speaking of curveballs, we got to talk about The Bachelorette before we go. It pains me to say because I really think I'm done with this idiotic franchise, and yet I find myself turning on ABC, and I don't know what's happening. So, Peter, last year we had a data scientist on with us, Susanna Summers, right? To help us break down what an underdog Bachelorette contestant looked like. Anyone 2 episodes in has caught your eye? What's going on with this season?
Well, Jordan, we know the first impression rose turns out to be the winner, a surprisingly high percentage of the time.
Not this time, buddy. That dude is not long for this planet.
But in this case, the first impression rose is given to the guy who's turning out to be the villain. This guy, Braden. Let me run a couple of quotes by you. Did you see him say, "The search for love is selfish"? I admit I'm egotistical. I deserve this date. That guy,
I just can't get past his dangly earrings. Looks like a moron.
Well, okay. But I mean, I think he's ready to go down as one of the franchise's all-time great bad guys if he sticks around. I don't think he's going to win, right?
All right. Who's your underdog pick then? Real quick.
We already know that one-on-one time means a lot, right? So I would look for somebody who Charity has spent time with, has noticed, but who has not gotten any screen time enough to register as a participant in any of the big arguments. All right. I like John as an underdog, and I got my eye on Xavier also.
Is Xavier the science dude?
I believe he is, yes.
Yeah, so I like him. He's impressive. He's smart. I like Dottam. And the tennis guy who had the longest kiss. He's going to be around for a while.
Oh, God, help us. That's teaching everybody
Joey
wrong.
Joey the tennis guy? Look, if you have underdog Bachelorette picks or you're with me and you're just done with the franchise, hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Jordan Brenner. Peter is at Peter Keating NJ. We want to hear from you. We also want to hear from you. What do you want to hear more of on the show? What do you want to hear less of on the show? Obviously, the answer is me for more, Peter for less. But until then, this is the Underdogs podcast. We'll see you next week.